Mark's attending.
Great. Okay, wonderful. So we have some folks online. Seems like we have maybe 4 or 5 people online. And this is we're in the 5th week of the month, which is why it's possible to have an all boards. So thank goodness, right, that there's a 5th week of the month. My name is Lena. I use they, them pronouns. I am on the Ward 5 steering committee. I am facilitating this meeting because I'm facilitating this meeting. You can facilitate the next all boards meeting if you want. But I'm going to facilitate today, and hopefully I can do our time together justice. We are going to talk about what this meeting is. We're going to talk about 2 really juicy topics, but first I think we should do a really quick round of everyone just very briefly, your name, your pronouns if you'd like to share them, and what ward you're in, just so that we can get a sense of who's in the room and know if we are missing a ward and take note of that. Take it away, Steve.
Okay, I'm Stephen Brown and I'm Ward 7 and I use he, him pronoun.
I'm Jane McDonald. I'm from Ward 7 and I use she, her.
My name is Zachary Cummings. I use he, him pronouns and I'm Ward 3.
Say Ward 3.
Michelle Borges, Ward 3.
Michelle.
I'm sorry, your first name got lost in the laughter. Brendan.
Only missing Word 3, timer, your guy.
Merrick Broderick, Ward 8.
I'm Robert Bristow Johnson and I'm in Ward 7 and I use it.
Jason Van Dyke, Ward 5.
Tom Carroll, Ward 8.
Gretchen Platt, she, her pronouns, Ward 1.
I've got Ward 1.
Phyllis area, Ward 7, Ward 6.
Tell us.
And she, her pronouns.
And Ward 6. Ward 5.
I'm Anita, Ward Chief. So, Grants and Finance Group.
Shawnee, she, her, run the NPAs for Zeta. I don't know how to make this camera turn so it's not just stuck on me the whole time. It would be cool if it wasn't.
We could turn the whole TV.
I think it's a setting called Spotlight. So look for that. It somehow seeks out where the computer is that's controlling it, which is kind of creepy, but there you go.
Nice.
And I think if we can hear from the folks online too, that would be great. Mark, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'm Mark Leopold, he, him, Ward 4.
And how about Nora?
Hi everyone, Nora Aarons, she, her pronouns. I'm in Ward 3, but very soon to be Ward 2.
And Annabelle?
Hi, I'm Annabelle Kymack. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm in Ward 8.
Great. And folks online, if you can't hear us at any point, please feel free to come off mute and I'll do my best to keep an eye out if your hands are up, but you can also just jump in. I know it's a little awkward, but feel free to do that. Okay. Do we have anyone from Ward 2?
Surprising.
Wild. All right, well, duly noted. Send a special invite to the Ward 2 folks next time. But I think we've got 1 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. Pretty good. Okay. So who has never been to an all wards meeting before? Sweet. Exciting. Does anybody who has been to an all wards meeting before want to talk about what these can be like and why we have them? Bryce?
Okay, so I guess I've been
I actually want to talk about this cake and how delicious it is.
Yeah, so the awards is our opportunity to come together, all of the NPAs from the various state boards to talk about issues that permeate their interest in all of the boards. to latest point, we periodically meet 3-4 times a year, typically in the 5th week of the month, the 5th Wednesday, 5th Thursday. We haven't had a meeting, I think, since last August, so we're a little overdue. We didn't have a call. So.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, all speak at least once a year, one of the meetings is for training for steering committee members. We talk about things like our tools, things like that. Or in the past, that's been the case. So.
Great.
Did I miss anything?
Well, that was wonderful, thank you. Any other thoughts and feelings about the all wards from folks who have been here before? Jack, do you want to introduce yourself? Sorry.
Hello, my name is Jack Tiano. I'm on the steering committee for the Ward 5 NPA.
Okay, excellent. That was all very quick, which bodes well because we have a lot of really juicy stuff to talk about that I think is going to take a lot longer. Today we are here because the Ward 5 steering committee had a couple of ideas and Jason shopped them around to our listserv. Welcome. And we're here to talk about them. And whenever we're settled, the person who just joined us, if you want to introduce yourself.
That makes space. Darryl Fields, I'm on Ward 3 NPA.
Nice, thanks for joining us. Okay, so today we're gonna talk about 2 proposals that came from the Ward 5 crew. The all wards can be really different. Each of these meetings is really different. Sometimes we're talking about a lot of different kinds of business. Today, we're just gonna talk about these 2 proposals. This does not preclude another all ward sometime soon. It does not preclude all of us working together on other things. Maybe before we get into our juicy topics, does anybody have an all wards discussion item that we should put on our agenda for next time? Yeah, Steve.
Yeah. I'm Steve. Again, I'm on the steering committee for Ward 7, and we work with Ward 4 when we do our meal every month. And I'm a chef. I've been cooking ever since. Like last Wednesday, we had a 7-course meal at the Robert Mueller Center, and we had a 21-pound turkey, 2 10-pound hams. We had a whole nice homemade salad. I made homemade Hawaiian butter buns, and then I made a chocolate cake that was from a recipe from 1920, and it was all really nice. And I love giving back, and I am taking a class at Mercy Connections Vermont Community Leadership class, and we are in week 14. Next week is our graduating week, and I'm on a mission to cook for all the wards. So I want to calling all wards. I think we should have one party a year for all of the NPA people that show up and give back to our community, want to hear what's going on in our community. And I want to cook for that party and or coordinate the cooking for that party. And I think it'll help us knit all the work together. We get to know each other. So
It's amazing.
Wonderful for the next meeting. Anyone else have a meeting topic?
Well,
Yes, and then yes.
I am interested in the training for the steering committees. I think this gentleman mentioned it, and I would really like something.
Sounds good. Chris.
So we talk a lot about local politics and issues that we carry something. If there's a couple guys in the ice cream or something, it's not fun. Why do it? So on that note, I thought that maybe we could do like all words fun events, and some probably all words NPA games or something.
I make homemade ice cream. Last summer, I made over 1,000 cups of ice cream.
Sweet.
So,
Sounds like you're volunteering to.
I'm volunteering to make the ice cream.
We got a committee right here.
Yeah.
Here too.
Okay, excellent. Any other all words topics? Yes.
Yeah, just, I'm in Ward 8, and we're in a rebuilding process. And one of the things we talk about informally and formally is the idea of linking or collaborating with other boards, especially adjacent boards on joint projects or projects of mutual interest. And I wonder if there could be a general discussion of this interconnectivity.
Great, excellent. I think we're gonna get at some of that today too. Anything else for our next meeting?
Yeah, I guess I have a topic. So this is my first week of I met Chris recently. I work for Chocolate Butter instead of already rented. So works great for Chris. But kind of like to represent the security outside the police field, the sites, so. And then wants to talk about that, so.
Can you be a bouncer for NPA events too?
On license, I mean, I think.
Thanks for sharing that. That was great. Any other things we want to get into the room before we talk about our juicy topics? Okay, and if you think of something later, we are all on a listserv. So you can email all of us, dangerous, don't send something boring. But you can use the listserv so we can communicate outside of the.
And if anybody is not on the All Awards Google group list, tell me, I'm happy to update you on there. I canvassed all the awards and tried to get an updated list, but it's kind of it's out of date very quickly. So please just, raise a shout if you're not.
Yeah, so on that note, I think if it's an all awards list, it should be a point person from every award to be able to. I don't think anybody from Ward three has access to the list at all.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. Can we close the business and next meeting portion of this meeting? Great, excellent. So our two ideas for today are one about how NPA budgets work. And there's a proposal that we can share, and then we're gonna talk about it, and we're gonna kind of start broad and see if we can arrive at any sort of agreement, or if we need more information, if we can make a decision about how we want to move forward. Our second topic is about how primary elections and caucuses happen in Burlington. And we're gonna, again, start really broad, try to discuss it openly, see if we can narrow and move towards any sort of decision, or if we need more information. And yes.
I'm sorry, is
Sure.
there like a reporter that takes notes?
Kathy is taking notes.
Oh, okay,
And I'll also use the recording to people don't.
okay, great, I just wanted to check.
Totally. Yeah, thanks for checking that, and we can all share whatever happens with this meeting with our steering committees, and also the notes will go around to aid in that. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So with these two big topics, I think probably a lot of us will be encountering new information for the first time. So just an invitation to be patient and generous with each other. We are probably not all gonna agree on some of the ideas that come up, and that's okay. And I wanna propose that for the next hour and a half-ish, we make decisions not by consensus, because I don't think that all of us getting to 100% agreement is helpful, but just arriving at general consent. So an example is, say we all agree that the NPAs should have unlimited funding for marshmallow fluff and limited funding for printing and space rental. And we're all on board. And then Chris says, what are you guys thinking? We cannot move forward with this proposal. Then we have to stop and we say, Chris, what is your problem? And we see if we can figure out what the problem is, and maybe we adjust the proposal, and then we move on. So we don't all have to 100% agree to be able to move forward, but we want to make sure that nobody's saying, absolutely not, absolutely not. We might not even get to a place where we're making decisions today, and that's okay. How does that sound? Not seeing any major objections, which is a really good first round of this. Okay. So our first, and people online, you're hearing okay, you're doing okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, so our first item is about how NPA budgets are set and used. And as of right now, Shawnee, can I hand over to you to tell us what each NPA has to work with budget-wise?
Yeah. Each NPA is allotted $3,000 a year. That starts the fiscal year's July 1st through the end of June. Yeah.
Okay. So we each, and just to confirm, the wards that do their NPAs together, so 4 and 7 have a collective budget of $6,000.
Yes,
Okay, got
because they are essentially, like, they are two wards, but pushed together.
cool, so helpful. So each NPA is different and beautiful in its own way, as we know. And some of the NPAs have to pay for space rental. Some of the NPAs provide a meal. Some of the NPAs don't do either of those things, and that's also fine. Some NPAs print things or pay for other stuff like incidental expenses. Some NPAs throw events that cost a bunch of money one time in the year, and then that's what their main expenditure is. And the proposal that came out of a conversation we kept having in Ward 5 is about how we make sure that NPAs have the money to do what we're here to do, which I think every single one of us in this room probably could define it differently, but in very broad strokes, we are trying to bring people together on a more local level in a way that is not going to a city council meeting, it's not going to a religious service, it's not going to a PTA meeting or a school meeting, it's different from all of those things, and it's ours in some way or another. And there's at least a few people in this room who could really get in the weeds on what the difference is between the city and the NPAs. But we already had a few all words meetings about that, so we're not going to talk about it today. So I'm going to try to walk through, this is a little hard without visuals. So we're going to stop and like ask questions and make sure that everybody has enough of an understanding so that we can actually talk about this. But the basic proposal is that instead of just getting a $3,000 lump sum at the beginning of the fiscal year that we can do whatever we like with, the budget is structured such that each NPA has enough money to provide a meal at each meeting up to a reasonable cap. That venue expenses are covered if you need that. And that each NPA can apply for up to like 1 or 2 little grants a year if you want to like throw a big event, or if you want to do something a little special or different outside of the regular NPA rhythm. And then some other maybe smaller funding for each NPA if you want to print flyers or if you want to do your lawn signs again, stuff like that. So again, instead of having this like $3,000 that's pretty static and is the same across wards, instead making sure that each NPA can provide a meal, each NPA can pay for their space, and each NPA can print stuff and also seek additional larger funds in case you want to do something else. First question, yes.
Well, I hear what you're proposing, I don't understand what prompted you to propose this.
Well, in a moment of transparency for the Ward 5 committee, we are completely out of money. And it is not because we are embezzling CEDO, and it's not because we have no idea what it costs to feed people a meal each month. It's that the Ward 5 NPA, I think in my few years on the steering committee, has become a good time because we provide a meal every month. And we just don't have enough money in our budget to provide a meal every month. So this conversation, and I want, if other Ward 5 folks want to weigh in, like this conversation came out of us trying to do what we think we're here to do. Yeah, Jason.
And maybe one way to think about it is that it's an attempt to make the budgeting more flexible so that each NPA, that the budget for each NPA is sized to the things that the NPA wants to do. So if an NPA wants to serve meals, there's a budget line item specifically for that. If they don't serve a meal, that's fine, an NPA doesn't have to, but if they do, there's money for that, where they don't have to say, do we serve meals or do we do a summer event? Because that would be 2 different categories. It basically means if you do more things, you, up to a limit, of course, get more resources to support doing more things for the ward.
Well, that was my question. Does each ward still have a cap of 3,000? And they just use it in these specific places, or would one ward get more money and one get less? I mean, those were my questions.
I think it's.
Wait, Kathy has.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things I wanted to just throw out to everybody here and the experience that you have in your wards is $3,000 for the year. Based on what you're doing right now, just by a show of hands, how many people think 3,000
300 a meeting if you have 10 a year.
I'm new, but I've been there since September.
Could I just see the show of hands? Yeah, take the vote.
We're both new to Ward 1, but my sense is 3,000 is enough.
Yeah, I was-
Just thinking that economy is so unpredictable. that 3,000 may turn into 2.
Sorry, can't hear him.
Hope it doesn't.
3,000 might turn into 2.
So,
You know what I mean? In terms of-
so that was a question I had for you, is
Lena, yeah.
is part of this exercise also to shrink the total pseudo appropriation for NPAs, given everything that's going on in the city, or is it a zero sum exercise, or is it something else?
So-
Something more to it.
I'm just on the steering committee. I'm facilitating, so I know it looks like I have information that you don't, but I really absolutely don't. And maybe our friends from CETO can offer some insight on what conversation should we be having about that before we move on?
So the danger to not spending collectively your money is that it's possible you're gonna lose them. So let's say when the city looks at how much you're spending money and see that every year you're spending less and less, then the assumption is that you don't need all your money.
That's really helpful. Thanks for sharing that. So, and maybe to just draw those two questions together. My experience on the Ward 5 steering committee is that we consistently spend all of our money and we often don't do things or make a mistake, and Shawnee's upset at us and I'm sorry.
I'm not upset.
We've had trouble doing the thing that works for our ward with $3,000. Some wards don't have that problem. Some other wards definitely have the same problem as us, I bet. So I think hearing what you're saying about our budget, if we have 3,000 times 8 wards is $24,000. So if we want to maintain our level of funding, that means we should do our best as a collective of wards to actually spend $24,000 a year. And I'm absolutely sure that we can do it. And so I think the motivation to answer your question for real now this time, Jane, is like, we want to make sure that we're doing right by the funding that we have to maintain it. We don't know who's going to be on the steering committees in the next few years. Maybe people have amazing ideas that are going to transform our city. We want to make sure that we at least have $24,000 as NPAs to spend on those efforts. Jack, and then we'll come back over here.
I was just gonna offer that I think the way that I was thinking about this, I understood what you were saying, Jason, but like I think that I would have described it as like the opposite. I think it's less about specific like flexibility. It's kind of a little bit less flexible in a way because it's less of a lump sum. What I think that it is, and what I think is valuable about it, is that it becomes more of like an equitable approach. Like so for Ward 5, we have our meeting spaces in a city building that we don't pay for, right? So we would not get that much that side of the budget, but we do have a really robust community dinner that we have to pay for out of pocket. And so it's less about who's getting how much money and about are we providing the same experiences to the NPA? And I think really what I think would be valuable out of this conversation is to see if we agree on what those shared experiences are. I know not every NPA offers a community dinner, and whether that's just historically because you haven't considered it or because there wasn't money, is that something that we collectively think is valuable? Obviously, a meeting space is required, and some people have different access to meeting space than other wards. So anyway, that's something that I'm thinking about, is how do we make it less about pinching pennies over which ward gets which money and who needs what, and how do we all get the same money, and it's how do we all get the same like platform to hold an NPA meeting, and making sure that there's still some room for incidentals where that makes sense. But that's kind of how I was thinking about it.
You have your hand up?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
let's
I
hear from
wanted
you.
to
Yeah.
piggyback off what he said, because this is my first meeting of this sort, but like, I'm looking at it this expense wise, I think what he said is probably variable expense, because meeting spaces in different wards is what's gonna be. I mean, you can essentially do a community meal for the same price in every ward as the meeting space, venues and how much that costs, and I think maybe looking at what wards use what and sticking to a certain space and then basing the financial distribution on that, because like you said, you don't pay for your place, but there's probably other wards that play a lot, you know, so that's maybe the variable, whereas, you know, maybe there's a set budget for the meal. And then after that, you know, flyers and stuff and then application for grants, I think that would be how I would do it.
So I wanna make sure I understand what you're saying, that you're up for this proposal with acknowledgement of the variable space cost.
Yeah,
I think the other variable is that not every NPA does a meal.
I think everyone should.
I mean, I agree, but I don't wanna tell you what.
You know, I don't know anyone else's experience, but I work in bars and different venues, and I know that depending on where you are in Burlington, that determines the cost of what it is to rent out a space. So I think, like, maybe coming up with, maybe every ward should have a community meal, because that brings people together, and it's one thing that Burlington lacks quite a bit, is people coming together for the right things, so.
I am totally with you, and I think one of the things that comes up at all wards is that all the NPAs are really different, and I personally have a set of ideas of what I think should be happening at every NPA. And lucky for you all, I'm only on one. So I just for the purposes of our conversation, I think talking about what we all have to agree to together is if we want to move forward with this proposal, and I'm totally with you that I think it would be great if every NPA had a meal, but maybe they don't.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Ward 4, like Mark, I think is from Ward 4. I'm willing to bet that New York then anywhere is renting out there is gonna be wicked expensive compared to some.
We actually, Ward 4 and 7, we don't pay, we go to the Robert Mueller Center on Concord, we don't pay.
But isn't there some charge that the Miller Center charges the NPA anyway?
I think so, no. Jane's been doing the accounting.
I wanna hear, okay, all right.
Thanks. I just had a couple of thoughts. I'm curious if we spend the 24,000 every year typically, if their money.
Not in the past 4 or 5 years.
So we need to spend money.
Right now I can tell you all that you're at 44% of your total budget, and you have 1 month to spend.
So we're.
Wait, that wasn't my only thought. So,
Folks, let's come
the
back.
other piece is I'm on the PTO, you said not. But I'm on the PTO at Edmonds Elementary, and we recently started a unified PTO. And one thing that's been interesting is learning what each school does differently in their PTOs. And again, all different in a similar way, and that we all do events differently, we support our families differently, and that kind of thing. But I think the one thing we all agree on is food brings people, for sure. So I agree with you, like food helps. I don't know, I'm just leaving my curiosity, like what I'm brand new to our board steering committee and really, and maybe to come down, like, what do the other boards do? Like, we have a meeting, we have a simple meal, we do have to rent our space. And we print some signs and some flyers, but I think that's kind of it, but maybe have a more robust meal, and other people have this summer party, and that sounds fun.
So maybe let's pause, because I'm hearing that people want to know what other people are doing, and maybe we can do a quick, like, let's go through the numbers and we'll start. You're in Ward 1, yeah? So we just heard a little bit about Ward 1. We don't have.
Get it right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know the nature of the different meals, because ours is kind of
simple,
very simple, stand up, you know.
Yeah.
And you're paying for a meal.
Yeah.
From.
Well, I think sometimes the steering committee makes chili and brings that. Sometimes they get appetizers from the kitchen, Ismail Kitchen down the street, and Namaste Kitchen. But we always rent our space from the Friends Meeting House. So.
Gotcha. Okay, so we don't have anyone from Ward 2, but we know that they meet at the Old North End Community Center, and I think always have a meal.
Yes.
And then let's hear from everyone else. We'll just go up through the numbers, and just give us like a little taste of what it's like to be at your meeting and maybe at your spending plan stuff. We're great.
So we meet in this space, which is a city space, so we don't have to pay for our room, but we don't, like other spaces, we don't have a commercial. So we gotta be creative. Fortunately, we have some local business here who has done things and some of the cleaning and donating up until this point. I'm not sure if they're gonna be able to continue doing that, there's some conversations for that. but had some other conversations with local businesses. We haven't really had problems with people. See, do folks being willing to step up and support that mission. I think for some of the businesses who have more of a community-minded social mission, that ties in with the things, so they're happy to come. For us, we're kind of a little bit of a rebuild as well. And people intend to expend the allocated amount for this year, and we do have some expenditures that we will be turning in to see very shortly in terms of some outreach expenditures, which is what our focus has been.
So Chris, you don't pay for your meeting space, and you don't pay for food.
Correct.
And those foods donated to the advice of business. One advantage being done.
Okay, and Ward 4.
Well, yeah, Mark's.
We're 7.
Yeah, 4 and 7, do you?
I can say something
speak
about seven.
together? That makes sense?
Well, you're
I'm
providing us
the money.
Yeah.
food. Are we paying you?
Yeah, you're paying me.
Okay, I figured we were.
So I started in September, actually the first meeting I came to was like last June.
Yeah.
And I brought ice cream and cake or something, the very first meeting I came to. I never saw anything like NPA anywhere else I've ever lived. I thought it was immediately cool, and they said they were just flying by the seat of their pants. And so that's why I was taking this Vermont Community Leadership class. I want to get better at what we're doing, and I think the food does bring us all together. So and saying in that, like, we have done our inventory for wards 4 and 7 there. Our audio, all our stuff, equipment is working nice. We don't need to spend any money on that. And I was told by Charlie, who does our film camera work, that we could pay it forward. So maybe if we have excess money, we can give some to 5. You can have a meal next month or this month,
Appreciate
and
that.
I volunteer.
And that's
I
why
like
we're
this.
having the conversation, just to remind all of us that there is a proposal on the table that we could choose to say, yes, we're into this, or no, we're not into this. And it's exactly along the lines of what you're saying. So that was super helpful. And then you're cooking for 4 and 7 because you all meet together.
Yeah, so I cooked for
Excellent.
49 people last Wednesday.
Excellent. And so you are receiving some money, probably just for ingredients, I imagine.
And a little labor, but we did get 2, like a turkey was donated.
Okay.
And 2 hams were donated now, and I haven't even met the cook from Ward 2 yet, who's been cooking for 20 years, only emails. But like, got some good information. They get like help from City Market and others. You can go out there and get help, like you guys down here on Cherry Street, like on Church Street, you get the local restaurants or something can help you with food. There's places you can go to beyond asking for money from the city to get help. And I kind of just know how to stretch $1 food wise. So I have 3 community garden plots, and I grew 150 pounds of potatoes last year, so.
You sure did. All right, thanks.
So anyway, I would love to cook for Ward 5's
Okay.
dinner. If you would like.
Well, we'll get there.
And he's highly recommended.
Okay, for, I can do
Wait,
numbers,
I'm gonna
yes,
jump in
yeah.
here. So we're talking about funding. So it's important, I think, folks to know that there are guidelines issued through the city's attorney's office that have been in place, I think, since 2019, stipulating how we can use funds, and here are some things that sound like there might be some funds being used in a manner that's inconsistent with those guidelines. But if we're gonna have a conversation about funding, it seems like maybe we should pull those documents up at some point when we're going around the room and review what we're legally allowed to use the money for.
Are either of you able to share those guidelines before we move on? Cool. Actually, let's finish our run through of the wards, and then maybe we could hear a little bit about that. That works, like in a minute. Cool. Okay, someone else from Ward 5?
Can I just add something? Word 4 and 7. I've been following the money, and we also contracted local restaurants in either Ward 4 or 7 to cater our meals. Steve's not doing the meal every time. And we feel like that money is going into our community to help the businesses that are there. That's very important. And I believe at this point, we've used probably 3/4 of our output. So we have plans, well, I have plans, we're gonna have a meeting next week. We need to restock some paper goods, and I have another idea to do a flyer out to our community.
Great.
So that would probably be some.
So some of
money
those
that we
other
have.
expenditures, got it. Someone else from Ward 5 want to talk about our meal?
So we have a meal at every meeting. And it's prepared by the People's Kitchen. And Fareed, that's Fareed's last name, I'm gonna make it. Minarsia, thank you. Is with People's Kitchen, he's the cook, so he prepares and brings the food. We pay for that food, and then any leftover food is then used to feed folks who could really use a meal, which is a nice way to kind of stretch the benefit. We don't pay for our space, and we typically do an event, like a big social event in the summer. Past couple of years, we've done one in Callahan Park, and we've had like 100 people come. Which has been really.
So we have gone back and forth on having meals. We tried it for a while and found that the only people eating were the steering committee members. So we decided that while it was kind of nice to feed ourselves, that just didn't seem quite right. So we stopped doing it for a while. And then following a joint meeting with Board 5, we asked for Reed to prepare food for us, which he did for the last couple of meetings, and it was a big success. Unfortunately, we have a meeting on Thursday and he's already booked, so we will be going back to pizza and seeing if maybe people are a little bit more attuned to the idea of having dinner there, and maybe the pizza goes, we'll find out. Last year, we had not used much of our money, and in terms of the guidelines for how the money can be spent, we had heard from, I forget the guy's name now, but somebody who does graffiti remediation around town. Ended up donating our funds after checking with CEDO to make sure it was within the spending guidelines. Donating some supplies to him for graffiti remediation around town. So last year we used almost all of our money, and this year we're kind of tracking just fine, having done meals at roughly half of our meals. And we don't pay for our space. I will add, I don't think there are any businesses in Ward 6, and there's no public meeting space in Ward 6. So we meet at DPW, and yeah. So
that's super helpful. Thanks, Jan. Great. Okay, and we got the 4-7 doubleheader, Ward 8. Anyone want to speak to that?
So Ward 8. Okay, so couple of things. We last year had a flyer printed and distributed, and somehow I think that came out of this year's budget. So we spent some money this year on flyers, and we're considering doing that again because we're, as I mentioned before, in a rebuilding process, and we're trying to strategize ways to actually get people to pay attention, to come to meetings and so on. In addition to creating an agenda that's appealing and attractive based on what we're hearing from the community. So we don't have meals, we meet here, so we don't pay for that. And I could be mistaken, but I think we voted to send some surplus over to you.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
Thanks,
so
guys.
that money.
Ward 5 is going to be the city's charity case.
So that money that you kind of went over, we're gonna underwrite, so.
Thank you so much.
Which actually I think is a really good, I think it's a good way to spend surplus monies, and it makes me think that, we should be in touch with each other sort of routinely to track this sort of thing. And to talk about plans and talk about what each of us are doing, and when we get toward the end of the year, see where we can plug some holes, because we're helping you this year. Hopefully next year we'll find lots to spend our money on. I do want to emphasize that we're rebuilding. We've been redistricted, and so there's a lot of new people in our ward, and some people have gone. We have UVM and College in our ward, and we're trying to make those connections. So we're in a rebuilding process.
Great. Yes, and then we're going to hear from CEDO, and then I'm going to try to move us forward in this conversation.
My question is for CEDO.
Great.
what is the rules and regulations or probability of NPA funds being rolled over into the next fiscal year? In case like, no?
Synchronous.
It's been drilled into us many times.
Yeah.
So you're saying that if these funds aren't used, they'll go away essentially. So then maybe like an agenda point, is it closer to that deadline? Is it like get a couple months away and there's a lot of funds not to be used, maybe like a citywide party or get together someplace that could get rid of some of this.
Okay, I wanna try to synthesize, and I see your hand, and I'm gonna get to you in a second. It seems like there is agreement that us being in coordination about how money is and is not being spent is helpful. Is that correct? Okay. It also seems like some wards are spending more money than others. Is that correct? And it also sounds to me like we still have a proposal on the table that would actually require us to be in a little more coordination and would make sure that each of the wards has the money they need to do the thing that they're trying to do. So I just want to remind everyone of what the proposal is, and then maybe we can hear from Cito about that. And then we can see if the proposal maybe can stick or if we want to change it. Can I keep going? Or is it?
Sure, I thought you were done.
Okay, so just a reminder, the proposal is every NPA gets money they need to rent their space. Every NPA gets money up to a certain cap to provide a meal. And then there's some incidental funding available for printing and outreach and flyer type of stuff. And then there's another kind of pot of money that we can all share for an all ward celebration, or the Ward 3 NPA can apply for a big event that they're gonna host and we're all gonna be invited, or something like that. 4 pieces to the proposal. The underlying intention is to make sure that each NPA has the money they need to do the thing they're trying to do. So, before we get to, I see your hand.
No, I want to talk before you go to Cito.
Okay, I'm gonna get to you before we go to Cito, I promise. Just, that's the proposal. Is anybody feeling like maybe they wanna make a change to the proposal?
That's precisely what I raised my hand for.
Okay, thanks for your patience. Would you like to speak now?
Sure. So it seems to me that it would be appropriate for us as a city to guarantee to each ward or to each NPA the things that they need to do what they're going to do, and then the other stuff we could allocate money for that would be somewhat proportionate or equal for each one. What's more important than a meal is a venue. And it seems like 7 of the 8 of us are not paying for a venue. I thought we were paying for Bill or Setter because Bill or Setter charges for other stuff. And I just thought it would come out of our NPA budget, but I'm not on the committee side. But if Ward 1 is paying for their venue, is Ward 6 paying for their venue?
No.
Okay, but if Ward 1 is there, that's definitely a disadvantage. And there might not be a good place other than the Friends Meeting House for them to meet. So that there should be a fund generally for the whole city, for the combined NPAs, what we are, I guess, to pay for at least the venue for every, and then places that don't need the money, they won't get it. But every place needs to have a venue, and
As an equalizer, it brings them up to the level of everybody else.
so
right?
yeah, then it brings them up to the level of everyone else. And then, for allocating a certain amount of dollars per ward, per meal, or per meeting for a meal, that's fine. And then if some NPA chooses not to have a meal because it's inconvenient for them, fine, and they won't get that money for that. And it won't be spent on anything else, because then the rest of the money we give we allocate to each ward would be programmatic. It'd be program expenses. It'd be for what we do, which would be printing, which would be, if getting a speaker, I don't know what the hell, you spend.
That would include microphones, PA system, and that
Okay,
maybe,
I'm just gonna pause because
Sorry.
all of our tech is provided by Cito, correct?
So we're not spending money on
The
it.
No.
NPAs are not, we're not paying for Zoom.
No, that's not the case, we have our own Zoom account.
Yeah, we get it from the number center.
Okay, great. So, and Chris, are you saying that Ward 3 has your own Zoom?
Yeah, we established our own Zoom because we needed a meeting staff to meet Zoom, and the city was not willing to provide us with access to Zoom. So we had,
That's for your meetings outside of,
for like steering committee and like outreach, like that nature.
okay, got it. So there's some limited tech expenses, but what I'm hearing.
Ward one, we have tech expenses related to microphones and amplifier and stuff, but it's not part of.
For your meeting, okay, got it.
There's
So,
also a couple of folks online that have their hands up and stuff.
oh, great. Wow, I really can't see that. Okay, yes, let's hear from Mark online.
And there's also a question that was typed in the Q&A that I can ask.
Okay, great.
Whatever.
I'm hearing that there is space expense. We want to make sure everyone has a space. So Ward 1, your space is going to be covered. That meal is second, and that also there's some other variable funds that are required for tech. Yes, go ahead, Mark.
So wards 4 and 7 meet together. We get roughly between 40 and 50 people every meeting. I think that to set a fixed amount per ward for meals, while it sounds good in theory, in practice, paying for food depends on how many people show up.
Yep, thanks for sharing that. Okay, bunch of hands up. Jane, Jason. And then we're gonna go to Cito. Yes.
I really feel like if any ward has to pay for rent, that money should come off the top of the bucket, the 24,000. And that should just go because everybody else gets it. Yep. Then take the remaining money. I don't like the idea that someone else is going to tell me I only have so much money for my meal. And I only have so much money for my mailers, because that reduces my ability to respond to what's going on in my area. I like the freedom of saying, hi, we've got $1,000 here, $680. We need to get more people coming to our meeting. I can take that bunch of money that I have and use it for that. Or if my money's going lower, I can reduce my cost for my meal. I like the flexibility of having a bucket and the steering committee of my wards deciding how we're gonna spend that money, because we know our community. We know what we're dealing with. To have somebody outside impose those limits on me, I don't like that.
Understood. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, Jason, and then Dale.
So, as people have been talking, I started thinking about this a little differently. I'm gonna throw something out and see if this makes sense. Our current system is basically each ward has its own bucket, and that bucket has $3,000 in it. And then, there are occasions when one ward will throw some money over the wall to another ward, which is great. But essentially the budgeting happens on a ward by ward level. Each get $3,000 done. In a sense, what we're talking about here is moving the budget to the all wards level, and then each NPA draws down money in proportion to the things that they do. So if they do a meal, and perhaps that's relative to the number of people. If they serve a meal for 50 people, that's X amount of money that comes in to cover that. If they have to rent a space, that comes in at whatever that costs. And it seems like fundamentally what we're talking about is the possibility of taking down the walls between the individual NPA budgets and having a shared budget in some form. And I don't know if that's a useful way to look at it, but it seems like that's kind of what we're thinking, what we're talking about possibly doing.
It is. It is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think that is exactly what we're talking about. And personally, I would say I think it sounds a lot more cumbersome. It's hard enough to get together with our own steering committee and talk about what we're gonna do to try and convene a group like this to hash out budgets multiple times a year, to do check-ins, to say this is how much money we have left. Sorry, no more meals for anybody, is harder, I think, especially for those wards who maybe were saving up and waiting to do something later. I think I also heard several wards, and I know Ward 6 has already said this, who said, looks like we're gonna have some extra money at the end of the year. We'd like to square this up with Ward 5 because there's no reason to keep it to ourselves. So I wonder if it would be a lot easier to keep the system roughly as we have it now, maybe with a set aside for venue rental, as we've all talked about. And then allow for some flexibility, maybe checking those CETO rules to make sure that nothing is gonna go crossfire if, you know, part of the $3,000 from Ward 6 goes to offset extra expenses in Ward 5. But not setting a whole new process for how we draw down that budget, just reminding ourselves that there could be some flexibility in it.
With, I think, a checking in process toward the end of the year to see who needs what or what we can do together to maybe utilize the, you know, the remaining funds if there's a surplus.
Okay, so it seems like there's some agreement that we maybe don't wanna go ahead with this particular proposal, so we're just gonna set that aside. But there is interest in further coordination so that we can make sure we're using all of the money. Yes,
Yes.
and
And I think we should equalize the issue of
okay,
venue.
would you hold on, please? Thank you. It also seems like there is not interest in having further oversight on how the money is spent. But that there is interest in making sure that the space rental is covered as a first priority before we do anything else.
Yes.
Does that sound like more or less where we're arriving? Okay.
Yes.
Great. I wanna just pause because we have been, I am very curious to hear about what we can and cannot spend money on. Cause it seems like there's some concern about that, and then we can come back to trying to arrive somewhere with this conversation in the next 15-20 minutes. CETO folks?
Do you want me to read the actual, like, rules for neighborhood planning assemblies
How-
as the
how-
funds?
How much?
It's pretty meaty.
Okay,
It has
well, that is pretty neat.
9 points. But we can do it. It's just gonna probably take like a little bit for me to read this one.
Okay.
So we waive the reading.
I've attached.
Yeah.
I've attached this for sure to all of the budget information emails that I have sent every single ward.
Okay.
So y'all can like, also I'm gonna do that again soon because it's about to be the first of the month. So I'm gonna rebalance the budgets, send out all of the updated budget information, send this with it, and the updated request for payment. But there is this brilliant piece of information for everyone to look at.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we all have it, Chris.
So my recollection is that there are two documents. There's one that is a 2-page document that's titled Rules for Neighborhood Planning Assemblies Use of City Funds, and then there's actually a formal memo from the city attorney's office.
I don't have the formal memo, I only
We
have
have it here, I would note that. NPA funding procedures.
Yeah, Jason.
Yeah. So what I really like about how this conversation has evolved is that it seems like the high level goal people really like, but the specific method that was proposed as a starting point didn't work. But what we did sort of collectively was to say, all right, how else could we get to that goal? And it seems like the goal is something along the lines of making best use of the full monies that the NPAs collectively are granted in a way where we each get to do the things that we want to do and we can support each other. And so, you know, Dale, what you said about having the venue paid for kind of off the top, keeping the budgets like they are, and having some sort of check-in is great. And the thing that I would propose adding to that is it'd be fantastic if there were like a shared online spreadsheet where we basically put in all of our expenses and we could see in real time where each of the NPAs is at. We had this much money, we spent this, and this remains. Because that way it would make it a lot easier to be able to check in partway through the year and say, you know, hey, maybe we should do a joint event. It looks like we've got some money left over. Hey, we had this unexpected expense. Looks like this ward might have extra. Would it work for you to make an adjustment? Like that kind of transparency seems like it would help with the kind of informal coordination that various people have bubbled up.
What do people think about some sort of budget transparency and coordination, maybe with some additional assistance from CETO, just to make sure that we're sharing information in a cohesive way? Do you have a thought about that?
Yeah, I have some thoughts.
Okay.
So, probably next time, if we're gonna have a meeting about funding, probably ought to put the guidelines out ahead of time, part of the meeting for you, so we're all on the same page and do that and start from the same base point. I've always felt that public policy should be designed based on facts and data and lived experience to try to maximize the benefits of large number of people. I look around, we have 8 wards, only one of them, is having creative space, and to be honest, I think that space in the city. But I don't know, for you all over there, maybe there's a way, light of your experiences with the university medical center, maybe they might consider donating some space down people out. But so that that's the space issue doesn't seem to resonate really with the vast majority of us. We're all getting city space, so that's really one issue for a smaller group of people. 2, I think it's important to remember what the point and purpose of the NPA was. It was basically provide a forum for ordinary residents to have a say and to meet with their elected officials and local governments to talk about issues that are important to them in their specific neighborhoods within the wards. And that was really more of a policy thing. And over time, the community dinner has kind of been tacked onto that. And as everybody I think recognizes, like food definitely brings people in and it draws. But I think we also need to acknowledge, and thinking from my experience, we were noticing that a lot of people basically come for the dinner and then they skip out. And so it's like, are we using the money to provide consistently to facilitate communication between the city government and the residents, or are we is it community dinner? I think there's kind of a balance that needs to be struck there. But it is a bit of concern that if we're having dinner, people come on dinner, leave, don't stay at the meeting. It's kind of like maybe we want to try to find a way to address that too.
Service ready, yeah.
So the other members have that problem. I don't think we have that issue.
Yeah, Chris, you're bringing something up that I think is a really great illustration of why each of the NPAs is able to make their own decision about how they run their NPA. And that's really valuable, right? That's why we have different NPAs. And I'm not sure that is a conversation that we want to have in this meeting. And I think there's room for us to move forward with maybe a smaller group of people who are interested in talking about how we do funding and maybe bringing something back to the group, maybe working with CETO to think about how we're doing funding. But what you're bringing up seems to me more like how each NPA runs their NPA.
There is some operational stuff there, I'll acknowledge that, but I think for me personally, if we're gonna be voting on something, I'd like to see a concrete proposal with numbers. And right now, it seems like what we're talking about is more of a concept of a plan than an actual proposal. And recognizing that everyone has different needs. I mean, in terms of the transparency piece, like I don't know what people spend for their space or for their money, but without having numbers and getting to your point, Jason, about seeing what people are spending, it's really hard to vote on a proposal that's kind of nebulous. It doesn't really have any basis in hard numbers. That's what it seems like to me.
So I don't think at any point in this conversation has it seemed like we're gonna quickly arrive at something we can vote on. So we're not gonna vote on something tonight.
Okay, I wasn't clear about that.
Yeah, I'm facilitating this meeting, but this is all of our meeting, and it's very clear from all of us participating in this meeting that we're not gonna vote on something in the next few minutes. So it does seem like there is interest. I want to hear from you in a second, Kathy, in thinking about how we use all of our funding, which is a problem. If we're not using it, it's gonna go away, and I don't think any of us want that. And it seems like there is interest in some kind of coordination. And what I wanna propose is that some group of people, could be some of us here, could be, someone on your steering committee is gonna be interested in this, forms a smaller group. This happens at all boards meetings all the time. We have a smaller group of people that take an idea and try to work on it and come back, maybe via email, get some more feedback. Maybe we have another all boards where we talk about this. Maybe we meet with CETO before the budget cycle happens again and try to move something forward. So again, not proposing that we vote on something, but that we keep the work going in another way.
So, it was brought up by a number of people, can we roll the funds over and all of that? That historically, NPA has not been spending $24,000. I'm wondering if there's a mechanism through the city or whatever to give so what we did at Decker Towers, okay, we get roughly $3,500 a year, tenant participation funds. It's a use it or lose it. And it's highly restrictive how you can spend that. It's federal dollars, so you have to follow all the federal rules. But by forming a resident council and getting our own EIN number with the IRS, Burlington Housing gives us that money, it becomes ours. It's off their books. And as long as it's in our checking account, we're filing a tax return, we can keep that money indefinitely, whether we spend it or not. So this year we had a surplus of $900 that we're gonna carry over and not lose, but we really don't have anything to spend it on the next month. So I'm just wondering if there's a mechanism that could happen so that, there's a potentially, the NPA becomes an entity itself and then controls all of its money. The city just pays the NPA what they're supposed to, what they're budgeting for. It's off the city books. The NPA controls it. That's
I'm sure you just made my brain happy.
Really is. We can invest in Bitcoin.
I really support Decker Towers doing whatever you have to do to keep federal money. And I am just gonna take a wild guess that this is CETO's worst nightmare. And it seems like there is both interest in continuing this conversation and maybe having an actual proposal with numbers to look at. And also that there's no way without gathering more information that we're gonna arrive at something that we can vote on tonight. So I'm wondering, I'm looking at the time, I wanna make sure we can get to our next item, which apparently we're gonna talk about for 45 whole minutes. If we can get a show of hands of who's interested in working on this so that we can carry the project forward. And Kathy, or maybe Shawnee, do you mind collecting our names and sending an email? Okay, so I saw, okay. Steve, Jane, Zach, Chris. Anita, with your hand up?
Yeah.
And Kathy?
I would represent Ward 4, Mark.
Okay, and that's Mark. Great. And Jason from Ward 5.
Just go pass around this piece of paper. People interested.
Oh, great. That's perfect.
Piece of paper.
Thanks for doing that.
That's great. So this group will take the guidance from this larger group, hammer out a sort of more tangible proposal, and then in some form circle back to see if the larger group, see if it captured effectively what people are wanting.
Yep.
Can I ask a question about this site?
Sure.
Discussing other stuff, do you have to be like a member of certain things to do, or can I start with this too?
Are you not on the steering committee?
I know.
Okay, let's have this be steering committee members only, because the steering committee members are ultimately the ones who deal with our budgets.
Good.
And I'm noticing, yeah, we've got 2 folks from 7, 2 folks from 3, someone from 5, someone from 6, another someone from 5.
And Mark.
And someone from 4.
Tom, don't you want?
That's okay, we don't have.
Well, it's a good question,
You can take that up with your steering committee members.
Chris raises a
Yeah.
point, should every ward be represented on this?
Well, I think this is not a decision-making body that we just created.
Advisory.
And that your task is to take the conversation that we had and use that as guidance for creating a proposal.
Come back with
And
something
then
actionable.
bringing it back to all wards so that we can have a conversation about it.
I think the most important criterion is that it's a small enough group of people that we can,
Actually,
get something done.
Yeah.
Just as a point of information, too, the original resolution agreement, the neighborhood planning committees did not contemplate the creation of all boards. That was kind of something that kind of kept a little there about apparently how it did evolve, but under the guidelines of the resolution agreements, it really, the latest advisory bodies.
Okay, great. Yes.
And kind of along those lines, I'm just thinking like, given the city's fiscal year and planning, I suspect that what's gonna go into next year's budget is not going to be influenced by this. But what we would be talking about might be some rearranging of that. Let's assume it's $3,000 times 8. Might be some minor rearranging of that money to better suit what we've talked about here. Because I can't imagine that we're gonna collectively reach a decision, make a recommendation to city council in time for it to go into the budget that's gonna be adopted soon.
Yep, that's a really good point, and I just wanna make sure, Shawnee, do you think that we are at risk of losing our $24,000 allotment in the next fiscal year? Okay,
Is
great.
Presumably the budget for the next fiscal year already exists and there's a number in it, is that number 24,000?
I don't know. I would not hold that information.
Okay. Then we can, maybe the smaller group can double check that, because then we can, like you said, Dale, we basically take as our starting point, there's $24,000 and it's gonna remain $24,000 and we're gonna propose some modifications to how we work together to use our chunks of that 24,000, but the fundamental parameters stay the same.
I mean, if we wanna advocate for more money, we can do that, but we better get going on it because
Power to you.
this
So
year starts soon.
this has been a really robust discussion, and we started actually way before I thought we were gonna start, so this has been more than this part of the conversation. This has been more than half of our meeting. So just a lesson to all of us for future all boards about how much discussion is possible when you have people who, many of us have never met each other before, and something that maybe seems straightforward to some people and is actually really complicated and tenuous to other people. And it's 7:42, which means that we have about 45 minutes left. How's everyone doing? Great, excellent. And we should talk about the next thing. Does anybody have anything absolutely burning that needs to be said before we get to the next thing?
I think we could make a proposal that we could act on tonight and say,
don't
out of the
agree with you.
2,400, if I may say this, you interrupt me every single time I talk, every single time. We could act and say, out of our $24,000 budget, we could off the top fund for the venues for the NPA, which appears to be only Ward 1 at this time, that would equalize that aspect for all of us, because the rest of us get free venues. But Ward 1 doesn't. Then with the remainder of that $24,000, divide that equally per ward as we are now. It might be a little less than $3,000 per ward, but it would be approximately the same, and then it would be equalized, and Ward 1 wouldn't be screwed because they have to pay for their venue.
If that was presented as a motion, I would second it.
Thank you.
And why don't we take that as the starting point? I think there's more that needs to be figured out, but that feels like a solid foundation. And then we can flesh it out from there and circle back.
It's simple enough that it could be acted on.
I agree.
Know how much Ward 1 is paying in rent.
Then ask the Ward 1 folks what they're paying for the venue.
Gretchen and I are brand new to the steering committee and don't have the history. I'm not familiar with all of the numbers, but I did have access to a piece of the spreadsheet. Believe it or not, I would say that it's about $100.
Small potatoes.
Yeah.
Small potatoes.
About
easily
$100 a
solved.
meeting,
So it's not.
which eats up about a third of our budget.
I can make a motion to table this discussion and gather us cleaning and red. So
I think that's a great plan,
So I make a
and
friendly amendment to that we refer
Go
to the
ahead.
newly established committee to deal with.
and that's what I was supposed to have it,
go ahead.
okay,
Anybody second that?
got a second, all right. Are we ready to move on to our next topic?
Yes.
Alright. Great. Okay, this is a really different kind of topic.
I'm gonna jump in before you get in.
Do you have to?
Yes, because we all know that this is gonna be a topic, so I don't know what the space rental is, but I'd like to move to suspend the rules and continue the meeting up till 9 o'clock because I have a feeling we're really gonna need to that's right.
So
I'm gonna
Second.
leave at 8:30, so y'all can do whatever you wanna do.
Yeah, me too.
I'm leaving at 8:30.
I'm leaving at 8:30.
I
second.
I don't think you have a second.
Lena, I proposed, my second.
Yeah, and then it got moved into the
Oh,
committee,
yeah, that's
so that
right.
the committee can keep working on it, because it's not it's not fixing the whole problem.
You seconded my motion.
I did, yeah.
Jason seconded my motion, so we're tabling that committee.
So you're tabling his proposal, which was seconded by Mark, but I don't think there was any discussion on his.
So
proposal.
there was some back and forth about how that is a solid foundation for the beginning of the work that the committee is gonna do. And it doesn't address the whole scope of what needs to be addressed. And since we just created a committee that's gonna work on this, that's gonna be the beginning of the committee's work. And we have a meeting that was scheduled for 2 hours. That's what everybody agreed to be here for. We've got 45 minutes left and we have another topic. So if everybody would like to table the second topic and we can keep hashing this out for the next 45 minutes, I personally do not think that is a good use of our time. And I don't think it's gonna get us to a resolution. But if people wanna do that, we can do that. What do folks think?
I just want to be clear that we moved on, try to take notes here, there's a proposal, and there's another proposal.
My motion was to table the discussion about budget.
Friendly amendment to refer it to the newly established committee that.
And
I've got that.
And you're right, Kathy, in terms of strict process, there was a motion made and we didn't act on it.
Exactly.
I think the NPAs are an informal enough structure that we don't need to strictly follow Robert's rules. And the idea of taking that as our starting point for the committee, I think captures the spirit of that motion, which is that that's a good idea. Where there's general agreement that we want to cover space rental for the places that have to pay it off the top before dividing the money. And when the group gets together, I'm very clear that that's the first thing we'll write down. So I think we're very much consistent with the spirit of that motion and we can be flexible about how it's.
I agree.
Okay,
I have a question about this.
Yeah, I don't know what the second thing is.
Because the second thing is kind of what I saw with the first, I think that's gonna take up more time.
okay, so can we start?
Well, I mean, is 45 minutes enough time to discuss that? That's my
It's just the time we have. Why don't we use what we have and see where it gets us?
Yeah.
Jason, do you wanna tell us about our second item?
Sure, I raised the second item, and the reason why I raised it is because I've been kind of around the caucus process for a few years. Full disclosure, I ran for city council a couple of years ago. I challenged Joan Shannon at the Democratic caucus and got flattened. And then in the most recent round, I wasn't involved, but what I did see was that the process by which Burlington nominates people to represent, to be, the Democratic nominee, the progressive nominee, what have you, is feels awfully opaque and kind of closed because it's run by the parties rather than being a publicly run primary. So I proposed putting this forward because it just, the way that the most recent Democratic caucus unfolded really didn't sit well with me. All of that said, I very much don't want to like launch into a discussion that's about some personal beef that I have. And I see it more as an entry point into a broader question of how do we maximize participation in the primary level of elections here in Burlington? And it may be that there are people who think that the best way to maximize participation is to stay with exactly what we've got, party-run caucuses. My sense is that I'd like to move to city-run primaries instead. But the question is upstream of that. The question is how do we maximize meaningful participation for Burlington voters at the primary level? So that's the starting point. I wanted to be transparent about where I'm coming from with that, but also that I see that the question that we're all looking at as a broader question that may go in completely different directions from what prompted me to bring this up.
I think before we launch into discussion, given how our last round of conversation went, it seems very clear that we're not gonna arrive at anything that we're voting on tonight, so that's not the goal of the next 45 minutes. But we might be able to identify that this group of people does or does not think this is important. This group of people is or is not interested in taking on this work as NPA steering committee members. And then maybe there will be some of us who carry the work forward and maybe not. So
and can I say one more thing, one more piece of this, which is that it's very clear that the NPAs have no authority over this whatsoever. And the question that I'm interested in is there a role for the NPAs in leading a citywide conversation about democratic participation and broad participation in primaries?
Can I speak to that for just a moment? So at Ward 4 and 7, Sofel, Copel, and Carter Newbiser came to our meeting and planned to go to all of the NPAs to increase the power of NPAs in city governance by bringing a proposal to the city council that for open transparency, that issues are brought to the to the NPAs before they come to the city council. I haven't said that well, but if you haven't had that presentation, you're going to get it in the next few months.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah.
So, Jason, you added something at the end that is really what I was trying to think about and really what I have a question about. And to be honest, absolutely no opinion in, but that is where do the NPAs come into this, if at all? And I guess I think that it would probably be worth starting with that. I don't think this conversation is about, do we think this is a good idea or not? I hope that what this conversation is about is, do we think the NPAs have a role in figuring this out?
That's great. Thanks, Dale. Yes, and then we have Chris.
So this is going to be a little bit more about the content, but I'm not going to be up or down. There is a nomenclature issue. I've been working in this. In fact, I've been appearing before the Senate Gov Ops about primaries in Vermont, but this would be having to do with the State House. But we should not call this an open primary because that's what we already have in Vermont. We have open primaries because we don't have party registration. And our caucuses have been open also. And in fact, in the mayoral election in the Democratic caucus, we probably got crashed by a lot of Republicans, which may have affected the outcome of the Democratic caucus. But there is a colloquial term because California and Alaska have called it their open primary, and it's not adequate of a name. And in the jargon has been, we've been calling it a jungle primary, or the probably more appropriate, call it a nonpartisan primary or sometimes the people's primary. But often if you're writing about it or if you're on Reddit or whatever talking about this, it's called a jungle primary in which all candidates from all parties, including independents, are in a single primary and running against each other. And then there's top 2 in California, which is very problematic. And then there's top 4 in Alaska. And I don't know what Nebraska is doing. I only learned today that Nebraska is also doing this.
That's super helpful. So just to clarify, what we're talking about is not having open primaries. We're talking about nonpartisan primaries, and the helpful
Also known as
question-
jungle primary.
Great. And the question that Dale prompted us with is not, do we like this as an idea or not, but do we think the NPAs have a role to play in shifting how primaries happen in Burlington?
I'm gonna save my comments for the actual subject matter a little bit. But I did want to suggest that in the essence of time that we one thing we've done a few times at Ward 3 is that nobody gets to speak a second time until everyone's at least had an opportunity to speak once. That way we hopefully avoid some back and forth.
Sounds good. Great. What do folks think about if this is NPA business? Yes. Friendly amendment to, we just adopted this rule, and I would like to hear from Mark. Is that good by you, Chris?
If the role, thank you, if the role of the NPA, as I understand it, looking back in the original document of why NPAs were created, the role was education. The role was to educate citizens in their respective ward regarding development in their ward that would affect their quality of life in the ward. If we're now saying, like Carter Neubeiser is and other people with a more progressive bent are saying that the role of the NPA should expand to being more of a decision-making body and a recommendation body based upon that education, it's going to turn the government process on its head to some degree. It's going to slow things down, which is not necessarily a bad thing in my opinion. And so the question is, for me, the biggest question is this. We don't get enough people to vote in the election, period. We get even less people to vote in the primaries. We get still even less people, even when we feed them, who come to the NPAs and make decisions. So this is a trend of putting more power into the hands of less people. Theoretically, it sounds like we're giving more power to the people, but the only people who show up are the people who have a voice, and not enough people, in my opinion, show up. I'm done.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else? Jane, you do?
Oh, yeah, I do. I'm new to NPAs. I haven't done as much reading on this as Mark has, but when I go to the meetings, there are people from our community who speak out about their concerns. We are the people who hear them. I agree with whatever those people came out. I forget all their names, Carter and Jonathan. And I think we can be a body that can really send those messages up to our city councilor or someone, because where our voice is going to be heard, if not in NPA. So that's my little bit.
Okay. Yes, and then Steve,
I'd like to kind of agree with what Mark says on the aspect of, is it odd? Because it seems like maybe the only person who's never been to a city type event like this is kind of common at these meetings. Is that a trend, and what can we do to change that? Because as someone who's literally on the votes has never been in here other than to go to the bathroom or something like that, what can we do to get more people, the voice of the people, into meetings like this and other meetings? Because that's a huge lacking. So it seems like everyone I look at here has been to one or more of these types of meetings. I'd like to see more people that never been to a meeting come to these things.
I think there's a lot of agreement in this room that it's better when more people come to NPAs, and I think it makes sense to me that most of us in this room are on NPA steering committees. This is a meeting that is open to the public, and it's great to have people who are not on steering committees here.
I think it's common that there's people like me who are not on committees at these meetings.
I think at all boards, generally, there's a few folks who are not on steering committees, but the NPAs themselves are much more where we see people who are coming in, maybe have not been to a meeting before. It's just a very different kind of meeting.
Okay, I just wanted to get the vibe,
Happy to
because I
have
think
that
having
info,
more
yeah.
people who have never been to these things who hold a lot of voice, I think is a great idea.
Yes. Steve,
So our Ward 4-7 is, even our steering committee meeting we have once a month is an open meeting. So anyone is welcome to attend that, so that's why you're welcome, you know,
Absolutely.
okay? And even, like, if you don't have the time to be a steering committee member, you're still involved, and that's great, right? So, thank you, yeah, so. And then we've even said, like, if you can't have the time to be a steering committee member, maybe you have time to donate a little time at an NPA and greet people or something like that. Help out, stay out, help clean up afterwards. You don't have to donate as much time as a steering committee person to be a volunteer, and just by coming to NPA, you're a volunteer kind of. And I have found that between the city, the flow back and forth, but the city tells us what's coming at us, whether public works wise, maybe, they rolled out all the water, the wastewater projects, and an informed citizenry hopefully can make a better decision when they go to the polls. And I think we can inform them about all of these ideas, and that's not a bad thing, so.
Kathy?
One of the things that got me involved in the discussion in the Ward 5 meeting was, I have a high level of frustration with the city council that it's so divided. I mean, it's so partisan, it's like Republican, Democrat, maybe it's Democrat, progressive. And for Joan Shannon's seat, you know, the candidates that came, had them in to hear them. It was so down party lines that you really could say, all right, if I'm for this, then I'm voting for this candidate, if I'm for this. But things aren't moving ahead in the city because they're just fighting over one or two votes. And I reach out to all the city councilors. If I'm interested in the thing, I'll call them. What do you think about this? And listen to them and express my views. And I think that having something in the primary process where there's not the pressure to, that you're only supporting the progressive side, or you're only the Democrat side, or the Republican side, or whatever. I think more people, getting to your point, I think more people would participate if they didn't have the level of frustration that we see every 2 weeks.
I'd like to just comment on.
Wait, we're gonna have folks speak first before people go in. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like maybe this might be a reaction to the electorate not necessarily understanding the tools for them. And that's partially responsible onto that part of that responsibility, and that lack is onto us as being the advisory and educational board, but it only takes 30 signatures to run for city council. We already have an open primary where we can have people run as independents. We've had independents be successful in the past. It might be that our responsibility when it comes to the parties running their caucuses or the open primary that we already have in the state is to educate our electorate on what is happening to them and what are the tools available to them as voters and as potential candidates. So it's like if someone didn't receive a party nomination through the caucus, they can still run as an independent candidate if they have the 30 mandatory signatures. So I believe that is our responsibility as advisory members to advise our respective electorates on what are the tools available to them.
So I guess on the topic of whether or not this is relevant to the NPAs, and to kind of the matter itself, I think the way that I'm thinking about this is from more like a systems level. Specifically kind of the concept that like the purpose of the system is what it does. So there's a lot of, I think, technical art, like, oh, technically this is how this is worked, or technically this is what the statute says, or technically this is how we're supposed to think about this. But there's also kind of like the de facto reasoning of how things operate. And the way that I see the NPA is for whether it was intended this way or not, I think it's kind of become and is the tangible outlet for people to kind of jump in and make these decisions in the place that it feels like they're most able to grasp. Like if you have an issue, especially since we're talking about kind of a check on the electoral process of city councilors, if you feel like the way that city councilors get elected is not representing most people, the most natural place, the de facto kind of place where you go to try to express some citizen power would be, in my opinion, the NPA, right? That's kind of the body you go to. So when I think about whether or not this is relevant to us, you know, I agree that maybe, you know, we can read what the definition of our rules and our regulations and our constitution is, but I think in reality, we do kind of become that beacon. And from the same perspective on the topic itself, I think like, you know, technically you can get 30 signatures and run as, you know, an independent. But I think what spurred this from Jason's perspective, as someone else who lives in the South District, de facto, right, there's kind of these party monopolies and these machinery that really make it easy to crowd out. In this specific case, you could say there wasn't a competitive Democratic primary in a district that was going to vote for a Democrat, right? And so there wasn't a you know, enough difference of opinion or a real competitive thing to get the best candidate. And not to say that we didn't end up with a good candidate, but just it felt like the process was broken in a way. And I think that that's a valid concern of how the system is structured. And I think that it's also valid to think that the NPA, the steering committees, and kind of us as the citizen body that might hold a check on that power is the place to kind of talk.
What else has spoken there?
Well, I wonder, I don't have an opinion about this actually, and it's new to me, relatively speaking, but my thinking is that what we're trying to do in Ward 8 is rebuild participation in the ward. And for me, that would mean getting people to meetings, getting and exposing them to the speakers we bring in from the city or wherever, who are making the decisions and who are casting votes and so on. And so to me, it's a question of strengthening what we do in our core mission as NPAs, which is to cultivate relationships with neighbors, to create a conversation, a dialogue with neighbors and understanding, and give them a voice at meetings. And then there may be some cultivation of candidacies, in those contexts. And so we can stay within the definition that we currently have and exploit that we're fully doing, at least speaking for our NPA, which we're struggling with this. Without, I don't want to use the wrong word, but without sort of intervening in these other processes of political process, let's say at the city level, state level, whatever. So, I'm not indifferent to this idea. I hear what Jason is saying and Jack is saying. I hear it, and I think it's cogent and persuasive. But at the same time, I think it's not. I think it's next to, rather than central to, what we do.
Well said.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
We, for 9 years, the city was run by Moreau and his gang. And things dealt nicely so that he could depend on certain people. He could depend on avoiding certain people. And the whole thing kind of froze into that process that was, Washington's frozen with England. But now that we have a different mayor and a different council, I don't know if the council was elected, chosen in the same spirit as it has been the last decade. But we could try and move away from the way it was, because it was strictly those progressives are ruining the city. You've got the Democrats. Those Democrats are ruining the city. Doesn't it? They would have many public forums. But you couldn't tell from their decisions that they had heard anything said.
So it seems like there are some variable and some conflicting opinions on if the NPA involvement would make our primaries more open or if it actually would make them more closed. Like we heard from Mark that continuing to bring public work in the purview of the NPAs, not that the NPAs will decide how the primaries run, but that NPAs getting involved is a smaller group of people than our electorate. We also heard that the NPAs are where a lot of people show up and speak their minds and talk about what's going on in their communities. So there's a couple variable opinions on what NPA involvement could do. And I want to bring us back to the question we've heard. Yes, this is our educational task. Yes, this is interesting, but it's actually next to our task. It's not explicitly our task. And I want to hear from folks about if we're moving towards like, this is NPA business, or actually this is way outside our purview. And just want to make a moment of room for anybody who hasn't spoken yet. Everybody's spoken, so let's go to one, and you haven't spoken yet?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So I agree with Jack's assessment. Certainly we see the same type of thing. I'm not in favor of that, but different political persuasion. But you know, for a long time, the downtown, the King Maple neighborhood, or this portion of it, waterfront, have been kind of linked in with the old North End. I've been in Burlington for over 25 years, and I can think of one occasion where there has been city council representation from somebody who lives south of Pearl Street. But that also goes for the state legislature. So for those of us who live downtown, we kind of feel like we're politically offended. We don't really have any political power at all. Because the folks that represent our ward really seem to be oriented towards a different neighborhood rather than taking a broader view of what's good for the entire ward. But that said, I think that going back to the initial founding resolution of why we're here to advise on government policy. This seems to be well off the beaten path. Political parties are by definition private entities, and it's up to them to determine their own individual internal processes for how they're going to endorse and nominate candidates. So I'm not sure why we're getting too far in the weeds for that. But from my perspective, as far as the merits of the proposal, I have serious reservations about it. Particularly the part that it's going to be the top two general primary. To Robert's point about Alaska and California, it's no secret that Burlington is a quote unquote progressive city. And I fear that this proposal would have the net effect of actually stifling free speech in our city. It would limit the number of minority voices that are going to be heard in the process. And it was also as a concern is that it would limit us to only two choices on the town meeting day ballot when it came to our candidates for city council. And I think that we benefit by having more voices in the process, not less.
So Chris, I just want to pause because it seems like we're getting into the proposal itself. And the conversation we need to have first is this a conversation for this group? Does that land with you?
Are you calling me out of order?
Yes, I'm facilitating. I'm trying to keep this a space where everyone can participate in the conversation we agreed to have. I'm happy for you to have all the opinions you have about this proposal, but we're not even talking about the proposal yet.
Well, other folks have commented.
At some time, maybe we should, since it's on the agenda.
Okay, so my understanding of what the purpose of this conversation is to determine if this is something NPA steering committee members want to take on. And there's plenty of other conversation to be had about the merits of a proposal like this that I think can happen should we arrive at the conclusion that this is NPA steering committee business. And I think anyone is welcome to have this conversation outside of this very long meeting that we are all in together. And so for the purposes of our next 17 minutes, it seems like it would be valuable to arrive at either this is NPA business, this is not NPA business. And then we can take it from there. Am I understanding correctly why we're here? Great. Would anybody else like to weigh in on if this is NPA business or not? Let's go 1, 2, 3.
So I'm gonna piggyback on a couple of those points. First, yours. The fact that in my circle, people don't normally come out to these events. The fact that it normally feels like it's a two-party thing, like you mentioned. I think the primaries were felt like it was either progressive or Democratic, and that doesn't, having that environment doesn't turn people out. And that's why that on top of whether we are in this room or not, I see signs from everyone. Burlington is a community of dreamers and free thinkers. And I think rigidity when it comes to a small committee like that, like this, I mean, when has rigidity in any specific aspect of our life, when it relates like this to do good? I mean, think about any area that you can think of. I don't think that proposal is for this committee, and I think that also can solidify the people that don't agree about the proposal, because if it's not for this committee, it doesn't go forward. But I also think that I came to this meeting instead of city council and other meetings, because this is the meeting that I feel represents what I'm comfortable with, which is the attitude that Burlington is a free thinking, open-minded community, and always should be. And like, I guess that's all I have to say is that like having the preconceived notion before coming to anything here that it's normally, from what I watch online with CCTV and stuff, it's Democrats and progressives arguing that stuff to this I'm much more comfortable with, you know, and it's like everyone knows Burlington is a bunch of dreamers and free thinkers. So why are we arguing on two lines when we're all for the same goal of making Burlington a better place? Maybe unity might be. This is what.
So I'm going to try to think about this in a really nuts and bolts kind of way. Over the last year or so, the Ward 5 NPA has intermittently focused our agenda for a given meeting on a topic that the people on the steering committee felt was likely to be of interest to people in Ward 5. We had one about affordability. We had one about the city's actions related to the climate crisis. We had one about safety for people walking and biking. And I think this is, in a sense, something that really could be in the same vein. Like just thinking about the Ward 5 NPA, we could organize a meeting around the question of how do you feel about opportunities for meaningful participation in local elections, and do you have any thoughts about how that might shift? And like we've done with other meetings where we've had a topic, we could bring in a couple of people to do short presentations who have some expertise on the topic to kind of, queue up a starting point for a conversation, and then open it up and see where it goes. And that's really what I was thinking of with this. The outcome wouldn't be any change in anything. It would just like how our discussion about affordability didn't change anything about affordability, but it was useful for people in Ward 5 to have a discussion about affordability. And it might be useful for people in Ward 5 and perhaps for people in other wards to have a discussion about democratic participation. And really the idea here wasn't to launch anything formal, but really just to see if other wards wanted, of their own accord and in their own way, to pick up this idea and have a conversation along those lines. And whether that then adds up to something of like, a proposal going to the state legislature to change the way primaries are done in Burlington, who knows? But it seems like part of our purpose as NPAs is to be a place for people to come together and talk in a constructive and civil and sort of facts grounded way about things that matter for us in our community. So that's the spirit in which I raised it. I'm thinking I want to go back to Ward 5 and have a conversation in our steering committee about if we want to build the agenda of one of our meetings around this topic in some fashion. And if other wards choose to do something similar, it just has a kind of, there's a sort of synergy there of like multiple wards all talking about the same thing, but it's not required and it's not anything official and it doesn't change anything. It's just, unless it does, but it feels important for us to, it feels to me like one of our roles as NPA steering committees is to provide opportunities for people to talk about stuff that matters. And that's the vein of this.
So it seems like a couple of people from different perspectives are agreeing that this is maybe valuable subject matter for NPA discussion, but it is not something that NPA steering committee members are gonna take up as some sort of campaign or project we're working on together. Okay, it's 8:19. We have a couple more people, but it sounds like there's agreement that this is not gonna become something that this group of people is carrying forward in a coordinated way in the name of the NPAs. Does that sound correct? Okay, great, and yeah, absolutely, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, personally, I think that this is a valid issue. And I'm going out on a limb, I don't wanna get into weeds, but I feel that we need to go to more of a system where it's a competitive process to pick people who run in primaries. I don't like the fact that we have two parties that decide who's going to run. And then we have to pick between two candidates we don't necessarily like. That's my opinion, okay?
That's not really the way it is.
But yeah, there's ballot access for anybody, we have ranked choice voting.
Well,
And we do
Wait,
that.
can we let Jane finish,
Let me
please? Yeah.
finish, I'm stating how I feel, and I'm feeling this at the national level. And when I read what you wrote, I like the ideas of having a more competitive primary. Whether we have rules that are written, I feel they're not being used in the city to have competitive people running a primary. That's my opinion, okay? And I think the idea of having a discussion in our NPAs is a great idea, and probably, I don't wanna take it as my, I don't wanna be the one that goes to the city council and said, I want these changes, but I think we could write it up and send it someplace so that our mayor or city council, whoever understands where people are at in this particular thing, idea, position, whatever. That's all I have to say.
Okay, so it seems like there might be some interest in collaborating on something about this. Sure, that's welcome. And it seems like there were also other opinions that this is not a good proposal. So that's also present here. And we'll get there in a second, but it seems like this maybe is the beginning of a conversation that individuals in this room have with each other, but it's not official NPA steering committee business in the way that we decided to make a group of people who are gonna think about how we do budgeting. Cool. Yes, go ahead.
Have you talked with your city councilor or any city councilor about this? Have you brought it like to the 2-minute thing, the whatever, the public
Yeah.
forum?
I talked with Ben Travers about it.
Okay, but in my opinion, if it gets legs, and like some of the councils say, hey, yeah, maybe we ought to do a jungle primary, or might change stuff. Then it definitely becomes an NPA discussion issue. We'll all have it at our own NPAs. And it'll become a city question, it'll become a charter change, and then it's gonna go to the state. It's gonna become a hot thing there. And I'm kind of familiar with this. And it turns out that I'm also kind of familiar with this primary thing, because there's H 474 that passed the House and it's in the Senate right now, but this is about state primaries, not about the city. But this is an issue now about the primaries, and I got some information for you. but we're not gonna be getting into content in this meeting, so I'm not gonna dump it out in this meeting.
What's the bill again?
Pardon me?
What's the number of the bill?
H 474 is about, it's a miscellaneous elections thing, but there's something about the, what's called one bite candidacy, and there's another part of it that's about independent candidates. And that one bite candidacy is directly about what happened in Chittenden 17 between Miss, I can't remember her last name,
Eloisa,
and Abby Duke. But I'll just put in 2 cents. I don't think the bill is adequately dealing with it. It's skirting around the whole problematic issue. And it's amazing, but David Zuckerman and I agree. Unbelievable on the solution.
So
Unbelievable, because there's another issue about it has to do with Zoriah Hightower. She ran a bogus candidacy for lieutenant governor on the Prague ballot so that they could keep somebody else from winning. And then she withdrew,
okay, so
and there's issues, but it's about primaries.
if folks want to continue this conversation, I really
Sorry, I got
encourage you
off the tangent.
I encourage you to keep the conversation going, and it seems like, you know, maybe this will go somewhere, maybe it won't. Maybe it will be that a bunch of NPAs have conversations about this and it turns into something. We're approaching the end of our meeting. I'm still not hearing that there is interest in having an NPA steering committee led effort to take this on. So I think we've completed our business. And if there's a few more people who want to say a few more things, we've got a few more minutes for that. Let's go to Dale and then Jason.
I just wanted to thank the Ward 5 folks and Jason for bringing that here, because I think that we are in a time when thinking about how we do democracy is worthwhile. And I think it's something that a lot of people care about and want to think about. So I just appreciate that. And I think that the idea that we can learn from each other, like if Ward 5 has a discussion about this, I think it would be great for the rest of us to hear about that as a follow-up from this conversation, to hear about it, how it went, what resonated with people or didn't, because then, you know, Wards 4 and 7 may want to consider it, Ward 6 may want to consider it, somebody else may, and it would be terrific to be able to learn from each other.
Amen, that's pretty much exactly what I wanted to say, and in that, I think the times demand that we be actively creative about how we shape the NPA as a space. And you know, there's, in the past, it's been just a sort of a vessel where people from the city come and present stuff and we're like, great, that's the agenda. And what we've been trying to do, and what I hear from other NPAs as well, is like, what are the issues that are important and how do we bring them up in a way that people find meaningful, and that, you know, like you were saying, brings more people out and gets more people involved in thinking about the issues that matter locally. And I would love, just what you said, Dale, to be seeding each other with ideas of, you know, we tried this really cool thing at Ward 3 and you know, 50 people came, it was an awesome discussion, and then other wards could grab it and try their own version of it. I would find that incredibly useful and just really great to be able to benefit from and build off of each other's thinking.
Somewhat related, but failing to remind us, I guess my closest answer to this is that to remind us of our duties of being advisory and educational bodies, and considering the fact that, you know, this conversation about primary and what does it mean to participate in the electorate have a big year upon us next year. I guess I can highly recommend to all of us in this room to educate ourselves on what is the process and the system that we as Vermontonians and Vermonters have to our disposal, and then share that information and try to get said information out to as many people in our board and our city, that these are the tools that we have currently. What you can do to maximize them for yourselves or minimize them for people of opposing ideology is onto you as a voter and an electorate. But I believe our duty as an advisory body is to just educate the folks that live within our wards of what they have for them.
Okay. It's 8:28. I'm gonna recommend that we adjourn this meeting.
I say
Yes.
one last thing before you officially adjourn it.
Sure.
Anna Maria made end of year fiscal guidelines, this like cute little thing. And there's also an request for payment forms. So if anyone wants to take them, please do.
Where did the list end up of people who wanted to work together on the first topic you got?
Yes.
Thank you, Shani.
Johnny, would
Bonnie,
you?
am I on that list?
Yes.
And when is the next meeting?
So.
I would be happy to coordinate the next meeting if that would be useful. Are you also on that committee or?
Yes.
Sorry, I was talking to Lena Mark, unclear.
It seems like we don't have a date for our next all wards, but my understanding is that any of us can organize the all wards. And so just in the interest of ending this meeting and not trying to do scheduling right now, somebody should set up an all wards at some point in a few months.
And I would be happy to coordinate that.
Thanks, Jason's on your team for helping coordinate. We have already a wonderful agenda of things we can talk about at our next all wards. And there's some next steps that came out of this meeting, and there's some next steps that did not come out of this meeting. And we were all here for a really long time together, and that was cool. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for facilitating.
Thank you.
Steve.